Portsmouth, on England's southern coast, the present turning to join hands with the past, emerging. It was from these shores that the invasion of Normandy was launched, changing the course of history. Today, the leaders of the Western world gathered to remember, Canadians amongst those being honored.
I was the second one on the beach. Thinking back now, I don't know how I survived it.
The guests of honor, the veterans, are increasingly frail, small on this big stage, but giants to those who rose to their feet for them.
It is with humility and pleasure, on behalf of the entire country, indeed the whole free world, that I say to you all, thank you.
The most powerful moments were those where you could almost feel the beating hearts of the soldiers in those landing vessels heading towards France 75 years ago.
They're honest about it. We were scared, all of us.
Art Boone from Stratford, Ontario, was 15 when he enlisted and 18 when he landed on D-Day, a tank gunner.
We had to make it all up that day, you know, because you can practice all you want, but the real thing is a whole lot different.
Boone was amongst those honored on stage today, meeting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau afterwards. The anniversary comes at an uncertain time, Britain potentially shifting away from Europe and fearful that old alliances are no longer as strong as they once were. Worries shared by Boone.
We spent a lot of time to try and make things better around the world, and we did for a long time. But they're letting it unravel now, and it's a little scary.
The greater the imperative, then, that their memories must also become ours. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Portsmouth.
The landings on D-Day were the first part of the ambitious Allied plan, Operation Overlord. It was, in fact, supposed to happen on this day, June 5th, but weather pushed it back. One crucial, uncontrollable detail in a meticulous plan. Canadian historian Margaret McMillan is all about the details. So, Margaret, when we look back at this day in 1944, take us to that moment. What was happening at this time then?
What was happening here in Courcelles was not very much. The Germans didn't know what was happening. Out there in the dark across the channel, huge armada was assembling, some 7,000 ships. Paratroopers were getting onto planes, gliders were being lined up to land in France. It was a massive operation. It was the beginning of the end for the Germans.
And they were relying on a good full moon.
They were relying on a good full moon because they wanted the paratroops to be able to see where they were dropping. But they also were relying on a good full moon because it meant there'd be a high tide, and it would be easier for their landing craft to get in. But they had to postpone it because the weather had been so dreadful, and it was still pretty dreadful on June the 6th, tomorrow.
But they had a really tiny window then.
They had a very tiny window, and it was a tremendous gamble. The whole thing was a tremendous gamble. And General Eisenhower, who was the Supreme Allied Commander, went around with a little bit of paper in his pocket, apologizing for it going wrong. They really were taking a chance.
So when you think now, I mean, let's fast forward 75 years and we think about what's happening tomorrow. As a historian, what are you looking for tomorrow? What are you going to take away?
Well, I think we often overuse the words historic significance, but tomorrow really is. It's 75 years since this great endeavor. It's 75 years since some of the men who are going to be here were young men here. And I don't suppose they're going to be around much longer for many more anniversaries. I mean, there's a sense of time passing, but there's also, I think, we're looking back at a time when there seemed to be a purpose among the Western democracies. And so I think we're looking at it as a moment when we can reflect on what we're doing today.
Okay. Margaret, thanks very much.
Okay.
We'll see you bright and early in the morning.
Thank you.
Okay.